Hello, good evening. Welcome to Thursday's Look North.
Our top story tonight, a transgender prisoner sexually attacked inmates in a female jail. Stephen Wood, who became Karen White, was given a life sentence for raping 2 women, then assaulting 2 more whilst on remand. It's led to questions about where prisoners who are transitioning should be held.
Also tonight, hot off the press. The publishers of the region's daily newspapers, including the Yorkshire Post and the Sheffield Star, is up for sale.
Table tennis player from Sheffield shares his mental health demons as part of a campaign to get athletes to open up.
I hope you've got a head for heights. Find out why people are climbing the highest wall in the country to help guide dogs.
And as Storm Callum approaches the UK, bringing wet and windy weather, join me later in the programme to find out how it'll affect us.
Our top story tonight, questions over why a rapist transitioning to become a woman was remanded to a female jail.
Karen White was given life today after she was found guilty of sexually assaulting 2 female inmates at Newhall Prison and previously raping 2 other women. Ian White has the story. Ian.
Thanks, Amy. Well, 52-year-old Karen White was born male and now identifies as a woman. She's still in the process of transitioning from male to female. Karen, once known as Stephen Wood, appeared by a video link from the men's prison at Armley in Leeds, wearing a wig, glasses and a floral blouse. She was described in court as a predator who was a danger to women and to children. The court heard how she used her transgender persona to put herself in contact with vulnerable women. She'd ended up in the female Newhall prison at Wakefield on remand after a number of sexual offences, including rape. She'd also stabbed an elderly male neighbour. It was while she was in Newhall she sexually assaulted 2 inmates who'd she'd befriended. White had previous convictions for indecent assault, indecent exposure and gross indecency involving children, and violence and dishonesty too. Judge Christopher Batty told Karen White she was predatory, highly manipulative and a significant risk to children. Tonight, though, questions about how someone who'd raped women and who claimed to be transgender ended up in a female jail before undergoing any proper gender reassignment and was able to abuse fellow inmates. The Ministry of Justice says a transgender case board should have considered all previous offending history and should have known the risks. This did not happen in the case of Karen White, they said, and they've now apologised. Karen White is tonight in Armley Jail, the men's prison in Leeds.
Ian, thank you. Well, earlier I spoke to Richard Garside. He's the director of an independent charity that looks at crime, criminal justice and social harm. He believes trans people who have committed violent offences against women should not be able to transfer to women's prisons if they've not legally changed their gender.
Well, the first thing to say is precisely that. Karen White is a male who was convicted of a number of serious sexual assaults against women, and in that context, I'm not sure how helpful it is to describe Karen White as a she. Now, how he ended up in a women's prison was because he put in an application claiming that he identified as a woman, and in some circumstances, male prisoners can get a transfer to a women's prison in those circumstances.
The Ministry of Justice says there is a transgender board. There were mistakes in this case and they've apologised for that. Do you think that there's enough in place with the board, or does the government need to do more to change the rules on transgender prisoners?
Well, in my view, the problem is with the policy, not the implementation. We have very clear rules in this country and indeed internationally that females should be kept separate from males in prison. The current rule is clearly a breach of that, and I think that whole thing needs to be looked at.
But there have been cases of transgender women who've taken their own lives because they felt that they were put in the wrong prisons.
Yes, and those transgender women who took their own lives were let down by the prison service. It's a perfectly reasonable expectation that somebody, whether they identify as female or male, should be safely looked after in prison and shouldn't be in a situation where they take their own lives.
So are you saying they should have been put in the male prison, or should they have been in a separate area in the female prison? And then is it segregation by putting them in a side wing, if you like?
Well, yeah, my view is that those male prisoners who identify as women, the prison service should look quite seriously at separate provision for them. They're not women, but they're also identifying as women, and it's important that their needs are taken care of, but that shouldn't be at the expense of female prisoners.
Richard, thank you for joining me.
Let's have a look at some more news in brief now. And a teenager who stabbed another 15-year-old to death in a street fight in Sheffield has been ordered to be detained for 2 years and 8 months. The boy, who cannot be named for legal reasons, killed Samuel Baker in the Low Edges area of the city